Welcome to the Anglotopia podcast, the positive corner of the internet where we talk about all things lovely British and history and culture. And today we have a special guest with us. We have Jules Mittra, and we're going to talk about travel in the West Country of England with a focus on Bath and the Cotswolds. Jules is the founder of In and Around Bath, a bespoke travel company that specializes in guiding tourists around the West Country and England with a focus on the areas around Bath. Jules is an expert on travel and a big proponent of thoughtful travel and experience all the wonderful things the West Country has to offer that are more off the beaten path. Their tagline is, "Get ready to discover England, the England you've always dreamt of," which sounds good to me. Welcome, Jules.
Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, really well. really well. I'm actually very excited to be being interviewed. What a lot of fun. I'm very keen to kind of have a chat with you and share what I can.
So one of the things that we like to do or try to do with our guests is ask them if they have a cup of tea with them and what tea they're drinking.
Yes, I do. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because I literally ran down, as you'll know, just before we started, said, I haven't got my cup of tea, which is so cliche, but it's true. And what am I drinking? It's not particularly exciting. It's Tetley, which is one of our big brands. I'm very much an English breakfast kind of builder's tea kind of guy, and one of the things that they started doing in lockdown is they started doing these big bags of like 440 tea bags with a sealable top, and I hate shopping, so nowadays I'm just like, get one of those, it lasts for months and I'm set. So nothing particularly salubrious, although we do go have more salubrious tea obviously when we're out and about, but this is my everyday.
Good. Tetley's is great. I like Tetley's. I'm drinking Yorkshire tea. I also buy it in 6-month supplies at the time. And it's early in the morning here. We're recording. It's the afternoon for you. And this is my normal morning cup of tea. Good strong cup of Yorkshire to wake you up.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, but I am a tea guy. So coffee is fine. But I'm probably 5-6 cups of tea a day. It's my go-to.
Sounds good to me. All right, well, let's dive right into the questions I have prepared for you, and then we'll see where the conversation goes, and hopefully We'll have a lovely chat about travel in the West Country, which is my favorite part of England. So please start by giving us the elevator pitch for In and Around Bath.
Yeah, sure. So I said Beyond Bath, by the way, just so you know.
In and Beyond Bath. Sorry.
No problem at all. So I set up In and Beyond Bath in 2016, 2017. I'm a big traveller myself, and what I've realised over time is I go for the big stuff, but it's the small stuff that has the impact. It's the relationship experiences you don't anticipate. And what we do at In and Beyond Bath is we share the Britain that, or the England that I love and revere, the historical, the cultural, the landscapes, those kind of gems that people imagine when they think of England, when they read the books, they see the TV shows. But very often nowadays, the places that we've all heard of are usually very busy and touristified, and they don't have the magic. So what I try to do is share those must-sees, the places that people definitely want to see, but also kind of then take them off into the England they've always imagined, to see those kind of places which I think exemplify our culture, our history, in a way that is meaningful as well, and that's also important. So not just going to places and go, this is a lovely village, or this was built in 1403 by blah, 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 but actually, why is this meaningful? Why is this relevant? And what's the story behind it, which we can connect to? And that's kind of what we do, in a way which I think is much more intimate and relaxed and meaningful than most tours. It's really about connection.
That sounds really nice. Now, do you get a lot of Americans on your tours?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that, because yes, I mean, our core market, I would say, is the American market, North American market, should I say. We get a good smattering of Canadians as well. Yeah, 90%, I would say, of the people we serve are American tourists who again looking for that. They want to connect with our culture and our history much more. They're coming to dive a little bit deeper rather than just kind of go from point to point and hitting all the big stops. And so that's our approach, and that's who we serve.
That kind of leads me into my next questions. Like, walk me through a typical tour. How are they different from a big coach bus tour where there's 50 people all piling into a coach and going to an attraction? What's different about you? What do you do differently?
The short answer is everything. I'll break that down. I mean, for me, I've always been a huge traveller since I was 3 years old. My dad come from Malaysia. When I was 3 years old, my uncle, who was studying in the UK, went back to Malaysia with me for my auntie's wedding. And what I've I've always noticed is that it's the impersonal. Going to the big places is very impersonal. Being pushed around is very stressful. And as a traveller, I've realised that actually having that time, that space, that care is what makes things really come alive. So we only do tours of, we do sometimes do larger groups of up to 16 if there's a family, for example, 3-generational family, grandparents, parents and kids coming on the tour. But generally what we do is we run tours for up to 8 people because in my experience and the way that I see it, 8 people is like a dinner party. And if you've got up to 8 people, you can connect and talk with each of those people in a day, whereas you can't with a group that's bigger. It becomes very much a person at the front talking at everybody else, and everybody else has to kind of fit into their itinerary and their agenda, which is, I think, the typical tour experience. And so you might get to see a lot, but it doesn't feel personal. You don't get to ask those questions. You don't get to have those conversations in those bigger kind of groups. And so for me, that fundamental difference of going to a smaller group where we can really engage and understand, tune into who our guests are. And actually a lot of what we do often isn't us talking about places at all. It's about talking about us and sharing that those things about us that make us come alive. And to me, that's actually the most important thing, isn't it? Because for all of us, if we go back and we look at anything that is significant in our lives. For example, if we go back to school and you think about those teachers that you had at school, you'll remember the ones that were either really good because they somehow touched you, or you'll remember the ones that were really bad because they somehow traumatized you. But for us to have meaningful emotional experiences, it really is about relationship. And so for me, smaller groups really inculcates that opportunity to really connect with people, to get to understand them and to engage. So for a fundamental level, that to me is a big difference. But of course, you also get a lot of tour guides. Tour guides have been around for a long time now. And the thing that I also have always found frustrating when I travel myself, and one of the things that I've done is that I created a tour company that I would look for if I go abroad. And one of the things that I find so frustrating is tour guides. There's a hierarchy there, and you usually have the tour guide. It's like I'm the what's the word I'm looking for? I'm the authority. I know what's going to happen. I know what's best. And you're just going to be passive and have to listen to what I say and go where I go. And usually that's the way that tour guides explain things. It's very academic. It's very much like, this house was built in 1703 by the 3rd Marquis of Lansdowne and his architect was blah, blah, blah. And my attitude is, I don't care. Unless you make these things connect with me, unless you make these things have meaning for me, it's just stuff. It's just information. And I think a lot of tour guides tend to do that. They feel safe by going, actually, it's all about what I know and being in control. And for me, actually, as a tour guide and as a tour company, of course, we have ultimate control because we understand, we know what the itinerary is, we know the routes, and of course, and we're in our own space. But it's about actually connecting with people and sharing things in a way that is meaningful to them, in a way that they can engage with. So to give you an example of one of our tours, we do a tour called Stonehenge and Secret England. And of course, again, we like to mix the must-sees with the unseen hidden gems. And so that's one of our big approaches. Stonehenge is a must-see. People who come to this area, they're going to want to see Stonehenge. So we do that on this tour, and we do it in the morning, first thing, and we get to Stonehenge. And I think we do probably the best. And this is from the feedback we get, right? Not necessarily what I think, but I think we do one of the best tours of Stonehenge because when we go there, it's not just, again, these were built, Stonehenge was first developed in 3100 BC and there's 56 stones on the outside. We're much more like, who built this, when, why? Let's look at the wider context of the landscape which it's built in. Let's explore the features of all the challenges with building it. How have they got these stones here and why? Why would they take these particular stones from over there, or why here? Why in this very particular landscape? And how was it used? So we kind of explore those kind of questions, I think, in a much more engaging way. And we'll do that really well and then give people time to go and explore the stone circle on their own pace. Because again, that to me is something that's important as a tour guide. It's not just you delivering and holding people's hands. It's also giving them the autonomy to kind of explore things sometimes at their own pace in a safe way, where they're not going to wander off, get lost or anything like that. But that time away from a guide is as important as that time with a guide. So that's important. What we do after that is we go for lunch in, I think, one of the most extraordinary country inns in the area, again, which you would not be able to find if you didn't know about it. Because again, that to me is the benefit of having somebody who is a local, who's passionate, going alongside you, because they will have those ins, and I'll use that word differently there, not the in, but they'll have those, those ways in, shall I say, to really go, yeah, this is an amazing place. It's not on the tourist radar, but that's part of its charm. And so one of our jobs is we do that. We share kind of places which, and again, my attitude is, if I had family or friends coming to stay with me, where would I take them and why? And of course I'd like to take them to Stonehenge, but also there's this amazing village here, and it's got this fabulous pub, and this pub dates back to the 1670s, and it's got this kind of story connected with it. And of course, if the food and drink are amazing, the service is amazing, and the atmosphere is amazing as well, that's what we share. That's creating something that's really powerful. And we don't share a lot of these places as well on our itineraries or on our marketing for two reasons. Partly, we don't want to be the people that lets the cat out of the bag, and then, we're like, here it is on Instagram, blah, 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 come look at this. And then it gets swamped with huge coach parties from China or Europe or wherever it might be. And that environment, that community is kind of completely overrun by mass tourism. So we don't want to do that. So we hold those places close to our chest often. But also, my attitude is, and it's a bit like, again, spoilers with a TV show or a book or a theatre show. Part of the experience is experiencing those kind of twists or whatever it might be in the moment. And if you kind of go, here's the itinerary, bang, 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 that opportunity for people to come across something that gives them that moment of pure delight is lost if they're already anticipating, if they already know what's coming. And so we love to kind of build these itineraries where, yeah, Stonehenge is definitely part of it, but now we're going to take you into this stunning piece of England, which you've not heard or seen about, but it's going to evoke everything you've always imagined about England. And you're going to come around that corner, we're going to turn up at a grand house or garden, for example, that is far too small to have an international presence, but it's going to blow you away. And I want people to have that experience in that moment, which they do. So that tour there, for example, then, after we've gone for lunch, we're going to explore, I think, two villages which are absolutely extraordinarily beautiful, very historic. Both of them date back over 1,000 years. And both of them have features in them. One is a church, one is a medieval ruin, which I won't say too much about. But they're absolutely extraordinary, not just because of the buildings themselves, but the stories connected to them and how they relate to us today. And that, to me, is what makes our tours really special. It's that thought about going a little bit deeper and connecting a bit more meaningfully, which I think a lot of, if you're thinking on the level of a tour is about just ticking things off or sightseeing, you don't get. And that's our differentiator, I'd say.
That sounds fantastic. I like the idea that there's this secret England that you have the keys to, and that, you're at a show experiences and people and places that people can't normally get. And I know as American travelers and in our early travel days, we were box ticking tourists trying to see everything we possibly could. And eventually, though, that kind of faded away, and we realized that the things that we enjoyed most were the cultural encounters we had, the people we met, the friends we made, and not just we saw a pretty thing, And I think that it leads to a more holistic experience, sort of pretending to be a temporary local.
Yes, exactly. And there's a place for that as well, right? Because when I was a young traveller, of course, again, it was about ticking things off or getting to places. I want to go to places because I've heard of it. And there's a difference to me, again, between what I call a mature market or a mature traveller and an immature traveller. And that's not obviously based on their personal maturity. But when you're travelling for the first time, you just want to see places, don't you? You want to go, I've been there, I've seen it. That's amazing. And as I think you become more experienced as a traveller, you want to connect more. When I travel now, I want to go to other countries and I want to get under their skin. I want to kind of really connect, as you say, with those locals. And the great thing for me about travel as well is travel is such a wonderful mechanism for broadening my own personal growth in terms of my understanding of other people, of myself, of seeing how my country is really good in some ways, but how other countries do other things and they could be better. And that opportunity to connect and share ideas and explore ideas is also really powerful. And that's another thing that I think actually is something that's so special with smaller tours. The conversations you have, I think, tend to be very, very open and heartfelt. But also, one of the things that I really notice, and again, particularly with American audience, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, Jonathan, is there's a lot of tension in the US, I think, and has been over the last 8 or so years, possibly a bit longer, because the political kind of extremities are moving further apart, and there's lot of tension where people then can get here, and suddenly they can talk about things that they couldn't talk about with their own families in a way that's exploratory and safe to do so because you're not in that environment anymore. And that's one of those unspoken real values, I think, of travel, is just getting to express ourselves and maybe pick some of those unconscious biases or belief systems that have kind of just been in the back of our head and get those challenged a little bit and going, hang on a second, is this where it should be? Is it not? And it's not about changing people's minds. It's just about having those open conversations. And that is, to me...
Go ahead.
No, go, no, yeah.
It's about exposure. And I know, there's a lot of British TV and British film within American culture, and that's how a lot of people are introduced to England and Britain as a whole. But it's a facade, made by movies and TV shows, and it's not readily representative of what really is culturally Britain. And so when you actually do travel there, you're presented with a completely different place that's different from what you saw in film and TV shows. But it's a lovelier place because you get to see English people in their natural habitat. You get to see how they live. You get to see the things they care about. One thing I love to do when I travel anywhere in Britain is to pick up the local newspaper. And I see what is concerning the local parish council. What is concerning, what are they mad about? What are they happy about? And it gives you a flavor of, could I possibly live here? What does it mean to be part of this culture? And I think the way you offer travel is the best way to do that. And I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
To use an overused American word there.
Well, it's funny because since I've been doing this since 2017 when I started, really, I've adopted so many Americanisms. So awesome is one of them. The other one being restroom. I now ask people where the restroom is, and they're just like, "Do you mean toilet?" I'm like, "No, that's so vulgar. Restroom. Let's use that metaphor." But no, you're
that's
absolutely
really
right, and that's the thing that actually I think also brings meaning to me as a guide, right? Because again, when I started my business. And I'm a former history and politics teacher. I was trying to get out of education and like, what do I do next in my life? And I've never really known what I wanted to do with my life. And I was like, well, what do I enjoy? What are my skills? What's kind of work environment that I'd be happy in? And that's how I kind of came to this, really. What I didn't want to do was get into a point where it just becomes routine, where people are just, you're on a conveyor belt and here's a tour and creating a tour company where sameness and consistency is all about doing the same thing over and over, because I was like, I'm going to get very bored with that very quickly. Where what I love is the great thing about working again with in the way that we do is I'm always learning. I'm always hearing other people's perspectives because it's an exchange. It's not a top down. I'm the font of knowledge. You're here to just be recipients. There's an exchange of ideas, of perspectives. And so it's always fresh. And the other thing we love to do, of course, is adapt it when you've got a small group of people. Our itineraries, our tours, very carefully curated as they are. And we think about all the different elements about it, like down to the roots. Like, how do you go from here to here and make that a really interesting experience? Going down tiny ancient country lanes, going, past beautiful cottages. How do we make this stop here meaningful? So every single part is carefully considered. But what we love to do as well is it's like a concertina. You can if people are kind of not so engaged in this experience, that's not speaking to them, you can just go, do you know what, we might move on a little bit more quickly here. Or they're having a great time at Stonehenge. Well, we were going to be meeting at this point, but I can just tell that they're really engaged in this. We'll just stretch that out. And it's a lovely thing you can do when you're working on a relational level rather than a transactional level, as I see it. There's structure. There's people. Our guests want to know what they're buying into, of course.
Right.
But there's that space to adapt and to reflect the needs, the desires, the experiences of our guests, and that's a really wonderful thing. And it makes it so rewarding for us as well as a guide team, as a company, because every day therefore is different, and it's fresh and it's engaging.
So moving on from that,
Sure.
I thought let's talk about the West Coast. So you're based in Bath, and that's the kind of the core of your business. So, what are some exciting things going on in Bath this year? What are some events or uh, that Americans would like to see and do, or that you can take your clients to see and do?
So first of all, what I'll say before we continue, we're based in Bath, and I'm actually all about getting people out of Bath. And Bath is, it's a
Okay.
UNESCO World Heritage City, one of only two in Europe, the other being Venice. It's a stunning city, but I'm really all about, there's Bath there. What's nearby? So I think that's important to clarify. But there's so much to do in Bath. I mean, the Bath area and the southwest to me is, and we live in a country. How do I best describe this? And I mean, Jonathan, you're an Anglophile, right? You've been here multiple times. You understand this implicitly. There's so much to do in everywhere you go. We are just littered with attractions, houses, gardens, countryside, and that countryside is varied as well. You can drive 2 hours and go through 3 or 4 different kind of natural kind of landscapes in that short time. There's so much to see. It's a great base. Bath. In Bath itself, of course, Bath is a historical city. It's got origins that date back pre-Roman to the Iron Age and beyond, when it was probably heavily populated because it was alongside a river. It has a spring. Bath itself, I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's basically the collapsed caldera of an extinct volcano,
Didn't know
which is
that.
why. Yeah, so it's again, it's a bit like Rome. It's said to be a city of 7 hills. And those hills, which kind of form what would have been the rim of the caldera, and then you have in the middle the springs on which Roman baths are based. That is the old vent, which is why you have these sulfuric waters bubbling up from deep underground.
Fascinating. See, I feel like I'm on a tour already.
But it's so it's always pulled people in because, of course, you can imagine our Iron Age ancestors coming and going, hang on a second, we've got water here, and I'm really rubbish with Fahrenheit, but I've got a feeling it's between high 80s to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, bubbling up in a country that's, temperate. There's something special here. So it's always been a pull for humans, and then the Romans come along, they turn that into the Roman, a Roman spa town, really. The Georgians come along after. It goes through a dark period in the Middle Ages, I'd say. Bath becomes a town for lepers in the Dark Ages because there's a belief that it has medical curative powers, these waters. And that's one of the kind of constant themes with the waters from Bath. But today, having gone through kind of the golden age of the Romans, the golden age of the Georgians, I think Bath is in its third golden age right now. It's become a very, very popular town. Again, having had a bit of a quiet period, I'd say, the Victorian industrial era. And so now it is one of the wealthiest towns in the UK. So buying in Bath is extremely expensive. But it also makes it a great place to come and stay because it's got amazing restaurants, it's got fantastic theatres, it's got a huge amount going on inside it, but also nearby. It's very accessible from London to the southwest to Wales. It's really well located for people who want to get out and about as well. But I'm talking too much here, Jonathan. I've realised that the question really was, what is there to do? And really, essentially, it's a cultural centre. So if you're into culture, architecture, if those are your kind of interests in history, it is one of the top destinations in the whole of the UK. And it's got so much stuff going on. Years ago, had you asked me this question 5 to 10 years ago, I'd been able to go, it's got this festival, that festival, 2 or 3 things that I think might be interesting. Today, it's the calendar is littered with festivals, sort of themes, things going on at various times. So, for example, I expect probably one of the things that your listeners might most be interested in is the Jane Austen Festival, which is something that takes place in September. And it's amazing because, again, that started 10 years ago by a handful of Jane Austen aficionados who were really interested in kind of exploring her work and writing, and to have a few workshops here and there, a few talks at some of the local venues. Now it is a mecca for thousands of Jane Austen fans from across the world, coming as far as Japan, China, who turn up in Bath over those 2-3 weeks and dress up in bonnets and empire line dresses or high hats and tails and breeches. And that runs through late September, early October. We've got Oktoberfest coming this year. We have a wellness festival in January, February, which connects in again with Bath's kind of history as a town of healing and rejuvenation, which has been part of its history since the Roman times. We've got art festivals in April. We have a food festival coming up in the next week or so. It's so busy now. And the other thing that we have in Bath, which is a huge draw, is the Christmas markets. And again, only about 10, 15 years old. And about 15 years ago, Bath Council thought, let's do a German Christmas market in Bath.
Nothing more English than a German Christmas market, right?
Yeah. Well, this is it. It's cross-pollination nowadays, I think. But that, it's one of the top in the country now, and it attracts thousands and thousands and thousands of visitors from all over, particularly, of course, at that point of the year from the local region. Whereas it started just near the Abbey with a handful of huts, it now kind of spreads through the main high street to the Abbey kind of area. It spills over, and it's extraordinary. So, yeah, I could keep going, but there's a lot to see. And my advice would be, if you're interested, just do what's on in Bath, festivals and Google, and you'll get to visit Bath webpage, and they'll list it all. But yeah, year-round, it's a great destination.
So, okay, now spreading further afield from Bath. Now,
yes.
What? Now, I don't want you to give away the milk, as they say. What are some things that Americans should absolutely see and do around Bath that they, if they're coming to Bath, like, they should book a tour and do this with you?
Great question. Firstly, one of the things I want to emphasize, and again, I think most people, probably a lot of your listeners will be aware of this, is England is not London. And if you want to go and see a bit of authentic England, you want to kind of really connect with our culture. As you already kind of alluded to, the Southwest is your favourite part of the Britain. It's a great place to connect into. I think we've got the most diverse number of landscapes, of fascinating attractions from different periods of history, from the prehistoric all the way to the modern and industrial, all within an hour's reach of Bath. Some of the big attractions in the area, Stonehenge is about 15 minutes southeast of Bath. To our east, we also have Avebury, which is about 45 minutes east of Bath. And those are sister sites. Most people have heard of Stonehenge, but not Avebury. But they are indelibly connected. They are World Heritage... I can't think of the word now. World Heritage attraction?
World Heritage Site.
Yeah, Heritage Site. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. Stonehenge, actually, the stones from Stonehenge come from Avebury. And Avebury, to me, is one of the densest locations for prehistoric sites and mysteries anywhere in the UK. It's surrounded by burial mounds. We have Silbury Hill, which is the largest man-made mound in Europe. Close by, nobody quite knows who built it or for why. We have several other sites nearby. So there's prehistoric attractions all over, and actually just southwest of Bath is the third biggest stone circle in the British Isles. So it's rich with prehistory. Landscapes are extraordinarily beautiful in this part of the country. Bath is actually the very southern part of the Cotswolds. People often think of the Cotswolds as being much further north, but the Cotswolds is a region of hills which was historically connected with the wool trade in the Middle Ages, and it stretches from Bath all the way up towards Stratford-on-Avon, which is a good 90 minutes, 2-hour drive away. And so you can access the southern Cotswolds, which is breathtakingly beautiful, and the northern Cotswolds, which is also exquisitely beautiful. A lot of the northern Cotswolds to me is overrun because it's had that visibility in the international tourist radar for so long. Visit the northern Cotswolds in the summer and you're going to be kind of visiting London in terms of density of people in some of those villages and towns now. And that's not to detract from them at all. They get that level of visitors because they are stunning. But there's something is lost, I think, when you get to that density of visitors. So the southern Cotswolds, much less well known. And again, you get off the main roads into the kind of back roads, and you are in a whole nother world. And again, it's very different from America, right? Because of course, and again, you'll know this. You go from one major town to a major town, and the only way to get there really is along the highway. Whilst in the UK, we have all of these ancient roads and routes which would have once upon a time have been village tracked from one village to another, or kind of connecting fields, and they're all paved and tarred in the 20th century. So actually getting off the main highways and into those roads is the most, I think, magical way of experiencing Britain. But if you don't know where you're going and you don't know how to navigate those roads, and that's definitely an experience for an American driver who's not done that before, you're not going to see that. But the Cotswolds is stunning. That's just to the north of Bath. And then to our southwest, one of the areas which to me, I think is one of the most beautiful parts of the world overall, but particularly in England, which doesn't get anywhere near the attraction of the Cotswolds, and to me is absolutely its equal is the county of Somerset.
Hmm.
And Somerset's, again, highly varied area, but we've got the Mendip Hills just south of Bath. Again, very significant in prehistoric terms. A lot of burial mounds there, a lot of stone circles. It's been used for over 10,000 years as a place of human habitation. But also some of the landscapes there, apart from these lovely rolling hills, you know, beautiful little villages, stone villages. We have Cheddar Gorge, which is the largest gorge in Northern Europe, which is where cheddar cheese comes from. They used to basically mature cheddar cheese in the caves down there because they were moist, had a consistent temperature, and still do actually. You can buy cheddar cheese from the Cheddar Cheese Company. You then have places like Glastonbury, which most people have heard of, less well known, but I think, again, for me, more powerful, more magical is Wells, which is one of Britain's ancient cathedral towns. And it hasn't really changed much since the 1500s. After the Reformation, Henry VIII kind of just ignores it, and it's not really had any industry since. So you walk through Wells, and it's like you're walking through the 1400s. And the cathedral there is astonishing. And next to it is the Bishop's Palace, which looks more like a castle than a palace, because bishops in the Middle Ages, not always particularly religious, not always particularly moral either, but also very powerful men. You know, these were the brothers or half-brothers of kings, dukes, earls, and so on, who ended up being in the church. And, of course, they wielded power and wealth, just like anybody else at the top of that pyramid did in that time. And so you go into this palace, and it's impressive. And the gardens there are stunning as well. So wherever you go, it's stunning. Oh, the other place, actually, sorry, Jonathan, I'm probably talking too much here. But the other thing that's really accessible from Bath, which, again, I think not enough people really connect with, is the Welsh border, which is only 45 minutes west of Bath, and it follows the Wye Valley. If anybody's ever watched the TV series Sex Education, it's set in that valley, you know, beautiful steep-sided valley. In the Middle Ages, that was border country. So you've got English castles dotted along the hilltops there to keep an eye on those, you know, miscreant Welsh from coming over and raiding and so on and so forth. And it's never really been developed because, again, at that time in history, the villages there were very insecure because they're at risk of being raided at any time. So you have ancient, tiny little villages in forest with this beautiful, beautiful valley running through the middle of it. It has fields alongside it because they were cleared by the monks of Tintern Abbey, one of England's great abbeys in the 12 to 1500s. And the ruins of that abbey are there. Again, you know, Wordsworth, Gainsborough come and paint it and write about it in the late 1700s, early 1800s, which really kicks off the Romantic movement, seeing these beautiful old ruined castles and abbeys covered in ivy and half fallen down, and talking about their majesty and the natural beauty and so on, really kicks off the Romantic movement. And the Wye Valley is one of those places where that really happens, because in those days, you could only get up there by boat. It was completely inaccessible. And today, you've got these stunning ruins, stunning little villages, breathtaking countryside. And most people don't get to see it. And that, to me, again, is one of my missions, really. It's like, we want to share not just the big stuff, not the stuff that you've heard of, but also these things which I think are absolutely extraordinary, but where you can also really engage with that history in those places without being, you know, shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of others on a coach, and have those moments of intimacy, reflection, and solitude, which I think actually are so important when you're traveling and you're trying to connect with the past, with history, with where you are. It's a spiritual experience often.
Sounds lovely. I don't need to be sold, but I'm sold again. Now, shifting from places, I want to talk about culture. So what would be some top cultural tips you have for Americans who have never been to England, who don't know anything about how anything works there? What are some things that you see create friction when Americans come over?
Good question. Firstly, I have to say, I love Americans. I think you guys are such a lovely, open, warm, embracing culture that actually I see very little cultural friction. And there's this kind of stereotype, right? I mean, like, the Brits have horrible stereotypes about going abroad, and some of them are true. The Americans have this. There's a stereotype about Americans being very brash and loud and overbearing when they come travel. That's not my experience at all. I always feel that Americans come over here with a sense of openness, with a sense of generosity and warmth, and so it's a very harmonious experience. And I think speaking the same language and being so closely related in terms of our history really helps. What I would say to anybody who's never travelled to the UK who might be listening to this, this is one of the things that I notice as a Brit, is Americans are much, much more anxious about travelling out of America and coming to Europe. And actually, for me, coming to Europe for most Americans, I kind of feel it's like they've got into a warm bath. They've kind of gone and relaxed. And by the time they leave, they're like, oh, God, this is amazing. And I think that's because the way I describe it is I feel that us Europeans have a lower, what I call, level of resting anxiety. Okay, and I'll explain what that means. I kind of feel that American culture today, American society today, there's a lot of tension, just resting tension. And I think that's because of a variety of things. I think there's a lot of pressure, I think economically going on, of course. There's a lot of challenges there with opportunity, which wasn't necessarily the case 40, 50 years ago. I think there's much more opportunity across the board. I think that's not so much there. And so there's a level of tension there. But also, the level of safety in Europe is, we're much more relaxed because our crime rates are much lower, particularly with lethal or life-changing, so to speak. And that to me is what I call resting anxiety. You just have to have that awareness about your safety and well-being, and you have to make decisions based on that a little bit. We just don't have that in the UK. To give you an idea, I never wander outside of my door and think, could I be seriously hurt today? Could I be killed? Could I be harmed? It doesn't come into my brain. It just doesn't. You know, for me, the chance of that happening is the same chance of an airplane engine falling out of the sky and hitting me on the head. So one of the things I noticed with a lot of people travelling, particularly if they're first-time travellers, is they'll say, hi, Jules, and they'll drop me an email and say, hi, Jules, we want to come and do a tour of Bath. Would it be possible to do a tour of Bath? And also, would you mind having a car on standby? Now, as you've been to Bath multiple times, Jonathan, you'll know that the central Bath is what, a kilometre, mile across maybe, pedestrianised. It's tiny. You can traverse it in half an hour from one side of the town centre to the other.
Well, there's nowhere to park a car either.
Yeah, and there's nowhere to park a car. And so I'll have people say, yeah, we want to do a 2-hour walking tour of Bath, but we want to have a car on standby. And I'm just like, you don't need a car on standby. But there's that anxiety, like, well, what happens if something happens and we need to get out there quickly? Because, of course, in American cities, often you can be in the right neighbourhood and cross the road and suddenly in the wrong neighbourhood. Just not really here for us. And so I think there's always a lot more anxiety and tension from Americans coming for the first time. Because, of course, what do we always do? We project an experience we're about to have to the one that we're familiar with. And so a lot of my time I'm just like, don't stress so much. Of course, you've got to keep your wits about you. Of course you do. I mean, I'm not saying switch off to, something might pickpocket you or whatever. Again, very rare. But you've got to be aware and focused on your safety. But it's so much safer.
Well, and you could say England, the reduced anxiety zone. And I know even during the dark days of the pandemic and the lockdowns, all I wanted to do was be in an English cottage in the countryside, because that is the quietest, calmest place I could imagine. And I'm like, this pandemic has to end, because all I want is to sit in a cottage in the countryside and just vibe.
Yes.
As the kids say these days.
Absolutely. And actually that was my experience of it. We didn't have those same, of course there were some people that were kind of like, the whole COVID debate, is it real, is it not? You take, that was there on the periphery, but generally we were just like, it is what it is. Let's just sit this out. And again, I'm very lucky. I live right on the edge of the Cotswolds. I live in a Cotswolds town on the edge of town. So I was walking off into the countryside, and we've got public footpaths again everywhere. We have this whole network of public footpaths, which it's like a lattice across the British Isles. They're all over the place. They date back from thousands of years. Some of them to much more recent for others. You can just walk. You can just get out, you can walk, and you can connect with the countryside. You can walk across private land, because that right to walk across that private land is enshrined in our law, in our common laws. It's exactly that. Just a nice place to just chill, relax, and it just feels the stakes aren't always quite as high. It's not just as frenzied. Life is not quite as frenzied as the US. And the final thing I'll say about culture, because I could talk about this stuff all day long, Jonathan.
So could I, yeah.
But the other thing that I think is a huge difference, and again, I think and America is a very young country, of course, still, compared to somewhere like ourselves. But one of the things that I think makes American feel much more isolated is that your homes, your community places, for example, your shopping, they're all very disconnected. So if you want to, in most of America, if you want to go to the store, you have to get in your car and drive. And then if you want to go to the gym, you have to get in your car and drive. And so it creates a slightly dislocated sense of community for me compared to ourselves. You know, we live in much smaller homes, and there's a big issue with that, I suppose you could say. But because our towns are historic and they're contained, we're not allowed to just develop them outwards. You know, you can't have sprawl in the same way that you can in the US. We're more regulated than that. It means that actually I see my neighbours on a much more regular basis. And if I go to the shop, I will connect with somebody in my community much more because it's only half a mile away. And so I think we have a kind of a stronger sense of community often. And again, we're talking in generalities here. This is not a hard and fast rule. But I kind of feel, again, that it's that warm bath feel again. You just feel a bit more kind of part of your immediate community or immediate communities, in a way where if you're living in a big city out in the Midwest, for example, or the Far West, where you might be on a big housing estate spread out, and then the shops are, or the stores are, 2 miles away, and then your church is another 2 miles away from either of those. It's less communal, I guess.
Yeah, I have a set thing of procedures I do when I arrive. Let's say I arrive in Shaftesbury, which is my favorite place to go. The first thing I do after I settle in a cottage is I go, okay, I need provisions. So yes. I'll walk up the Gold Hill to the grocery store. Yeah. And I'll buy groceries. I'll go to the baker and get some pastries. I'll go get a cup of tea at the cafe. I'll see what new shops have appeared on the high street, and you hear the church bells ringing, and you immediately feel like you're a part of a community, even though you're a foreigner there. Yes. And it's such a holistic experience because you're like, I feel like a temporary local. It's my happy place, and I'm always working to get back there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Shelton and Gold Hill, because again, if anybody's listening, Gold Hill's got to be one of the most beautiful streets in England. It's a beautiful cobbled street.
Yeah, that's right.
Shaftesbury's on top of the hill. Yeah, absolutely stunning. But that's exactly it. That's the difference there. You just expressed it perfectly. And again, it's one of the things I notice when I'm in the UK is I'm walking past people, we're not to say hello to each other, even though I've got no idea who they are. We'll take dogs out, and there's that little. It sounds cliche, and you do see it in the films away, but it's there. It's there. There's just that kind of touch points, which I think in a society like much of the US is, where people are just very much kind of in home, in car, or at location, miss those opportunities.
Well, that's why a movie like The Holiday is so popular with Americans, is because it paints a picture of this bucolic bliss that it's so easy to just fall into and become a part of. It looks nice,
Yeah.
So moving on from that, we couldn't talk about Bath and the Cotswolds without talking about Bridgerton. Bridgerton has taken America by storm. Have you seen a lot of interest in Bridgerton from your clients? And what would you recommend Bridgerton fans see or do if they want to come to Bath?
Absolutely. And actually, I mean, again, one of the lovely things about much of our area is it is a film set. It's an extended film set. If you've ever seen any of the Harry Potter films, Pride and Prejudice, any of the Jane Austen series, anything historical from the Georgian period, you're kind of in the Bath, Wiltshire, Somerset, Cotswolds area. And so there's always filming going on around us. Bridgerton has been a huge success for Bath. And of course, ostensibly it's set in London. But about, I'd say, 70% of the scenes are shot in Baths. And I watched series 1. I've just been started to watch series 3 because my girlfriend is just come out on Netflix, and she's like, yeah, we're watching it again. So I'm just having a series 3. I haven't seen series 2, so I can't talk again too authoritatively about the actual characters again, because I can't remember them. But I know the main lady, and I can't remember her name. Her house, where they have the kind of balls, that's Bath. When they actually have the bath, so the outside is the Holborn Museum, as it now is, beautiful museum. That's her house. When they go for the interior shots of the balls, that's the assembly rooms in Bath. Several of the main streets in Bath are used all the time for filming. So the big place is the Abbey Square, in the middle of Bath, which is this beautiful square with this lovely plane tree in the middle. And every time they go for a gossip, and I can't remember the lady who's the main character, who's the secret author of all the scandal and slander. I should have done my research here. So I just want to find these characters properly.
It's a Lady Whistledown.
That's it, Lady Whistledown. Every time she's going for a gossip, it's always on that square. And then they just shoot it from a slightly different angle. I'm just like, oh, there it is again. But yeah, it's huge. And actually, I don't personally have that. That's not my specialism. There's some great tours in Bath. In fact, even the free walking tours are amazing in Bath. They're really, really good. But yeah, if you're a Bridgerton fan, stay in Bath. Go and do a day trip down to Wilton House. If you ever see them walking in the country grounds with the river, that's Wilton House, which is right by Salisbury, which is about an hour south from Bath. And the Wilton House itself is a stunning historic property, and the grounds, as you can tell from that show, are amazing. But yeah, there's so much. Castle Combe, probably often the most iconic Cotswolds village, is 10 minutes, 15 minutes from Bath. That's where they filmed War Horse, Dr. Dolittle, the original Rex Harrison version in the 1960s. Is being used in Stardust. That's there near me. I live in Corsham, a little village called Corsham, which is a town called Corsham, which is about 6 miles outside of Bath, and we featured heavily in Poldark. So if you ever watched Poldark, that was, they'd come into our high street every time they turned up in at the coast, and they kind of blue screened or green screened the whole back to make it look like tall ships and stuff. It's fascinating. But yeah, the whole area is a mecca. If you're into film, Laycock, again, Pride and Prejudice, Harry Potter, Downton Abbey was filmed there as well. There's so much. It's hard to know where to start and what to focus on because there's just so much going on.
And that's the thing about Bath, is that when they want to film there, they don't have to do much set dressing to make it look authentic. And they can turn up and beautiful Georgian buildings, exactly what we need for this shot. Yeah, it's what's amazing is that these places are real. We're trained to think that, these are sets, these aren't real places. But no, they're real places, and it's much easier for them to go to the real places than it is to build a set of these places. Yeah.
I want to share one story that you're absolutely right, Jonathan. And there was one story which I find particularly funny, and that is there's a street called Pulteney Street. And I don't know if you're familiar with Pulteney Street. You cross Pulteney Bridge, which again is this beautiful Italian bridge, which is inspired by the Ponte Vecchio, the Alto bridges. Anyway, along that, on the other side, you have Pulteney Street, and it's this big, wide open avenue of Georgian buildings on either side, and it's been used in the Duchess, it's been used in Vanity Fair, and so on. And talking about Vanity Fair, if you look at the lampposts there, in the 1970s, they put very, utilitarian modern lampposts in, these kind of big, kind of L-shaped lampposts with halogen bulbs in and so on. And when they filmed Vanity Fair in the 1990s, I think it was, obviously having horrible 70s lamps didn't work. So they took them all out and put in cast iron 1700s lampposts to be appropriate to periods. And when they finished filming that film, the production company realised, well, we've got these lampposts that we put in here. They're massively heavy because they're cast iron, properly, exactly as it looked in the 1700s. They thought, we might just leave them here. So they asked Bath Council, shall we, do you mind if we just keep these here and not take them with us? And Bath Council was like, yeah, great. So those lampposts there are actually a film prop, which have remained for the last 30 years. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't need much at all. And again, several of the other locations nearby, exactly the same. Laycock is a village which is medieval in nature. Most of the buildings there date back to the 1500s. And it's been owned by the National Trust since the 1950s, and they've never allowed TV aerials, telegraph poles, and that kind of stuff. Again, so it's hugely popular as a film set because all you need to do is cover over the ground and the tarmac with a bit of dirt, put a prop here and there, and suddenly you've got a film set. So there's always filming going on.
And that's where they discovered photography. So
it is Laycock Abbey, where the negative process was invented. That came to fame too.
I went there a few years ago. I love my visit there. All right, so we're gonna wrap it up with one more question.
Sure.
And this one might be a challenge for you. I hope it's a challenge.
Okay.
Outside of Bath and the Cotswolds, where is your favorite place in England to go? Where do you go on holiday?
That is a good question. It's a difficult one because I love to travel. I mean, when I was a teacher as well, this is a great thing about me being a teacher. I love to travel. And one of the reasons I was a teacher is I got the vacations, right? So the big vacations that summer, I'd often go overseas. In the smaller ones, I'd often go to Europe. And in the midterm breaks, I'd often travel around the UK. There are certain areas which I think are breathtakingly beautiful, extraordinary, and yet again don't have the visibility that other places in the UK have now. And I'm not saying this is my favourite place, but it's one of my favourite places, and this is Ludlow and the Shropshire Hills. And that's an area, if you were to look at a map, it's kind of between Birmingham, just to the west, into the Welsh, kind of moving towards the Welsh border. It's a border country again. So it's kind of like along mid Wales. And it is extraordinary. Ludlow is a medieval town. It has a castle there, which is where Henry VIII was born. The town itself still has a lot of black and white buildings, as we call them. So these black timbered buildings with white walls and, Tudor windows. And it is a mecca for foodies. It's got an amazing food festival every year there. But again, just stunning. And I love places where you can have a base and then explore nearby. And the countryside, the history, the little pubs that you find in that area are absolutely to die for. But most people have never heard of that area. So probably I'll say that would be one of my favourite places. But it is hard because I could immediately think of Lincoln in the east as well. Again, another area where beautiful old town, lots to see and do nearby. And again, for me, I have a love of culture, history, and nature. And so anywhere that shares that, and great food, actually. Anything that has that combination is a win for me. So there's a few.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Anglotopia podcast, Jules. His company, again, for if you didn't hear it, is In and Beyond Bath, and we'll put a link in the show notes. Full disclosure, he is not an advertiser, so we've had some interaction with him over the years, and I knew when we wanted to have guests that we wanted to have Jules on because he knows the West Country. And so thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Jonathan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for such a lovely interview. I've really enjoyed it.
All right. Cheers. We'll have to have you on again soon.
Will do. Take care. Well, listen, have a great time. And next time you're down this way, drop me a line.
I definitely will, because I'm sold.